Hello, everyone. R-I-L. April is Deaf History Month. And I have some books that are about people who are deaf. Today's book is called The Mitten String, and it's by Jennifer Rossier and illustrated by Christina Swarner. It was said that Ruthie Tober's family warmed the hands of the entire village because everyone who lived there, big and small, wore mittens knitted by the Tober wool. So wool comes from sheep, and the Tober family got their wool from raising sheep. The Tober sheep had the fluffiest wool in the region. On shearing days, friends and neighbors came to help Ruthie's family clip and gather soft, downy fleece. The Tobers worked hard, scouring, picking, and carding the wool. Ruthie, who loved bright colors, prepared the pots of dyeing. When it was time for spinning, Ruthie's mother stood at the great wheel and spun the wool into yarn. Most nights, Ruthie and her mother sat together and knitted. Ruthie loved how their stitches, each one a tiny knot of yarn, added up to form warm, cozy garments. Ruthie especially loved making mittens. She knitted plenty of extras in the smallest sizes because she had noticed that many children lost their mittens every winter. Ruthie herself had lost some, her mother reminded her with a wink. Look at all those beautiful, colorful mittens they've knitted. On market days, Ruthie's parents loaded their wagon with bolts of cloth and heaping baskets of yarn to sell and trade. Ruthie took along a basket of her most colorful mittens. One day, on the way home from market, Ruthie's family came upon a woman standing with her baby on the side of the road. The woman did not speak to them. Instead, she held up a slate with neatly printed message. Her husband had gone for help. The message says, "Broken wagon, help." The Tobers invited the woman and her child to spend the night. Smiling gratefully, the woman wrote her name, Bela, on her and her baby's name, Aaron, on the slate. Ruthie noticed a length of yarn wrapped around Bela's wrist. The yarn was the deepest blue Ruthie had ever seen, deeper than the special blue thread braided into the white tassels of her father's prayer shawl. Ruthie imagined the mittens she could make with a yarn like that. Why doesn't Bela speak? Ruthie asked her mother. Bela is deaf, her mother explained. She cannot hear, so she cannot speak. Luckily, she reads and writes. It is very wise of her to carry chalk and a slate. Ruthie watched in amazement as Bela communicated with Aaron using hand signs. To Ruthie, it looked as if Bela were standing before an invisible spinning wheel, her words flowing from her fingers like delicate strands of yarn. That night, Ruthie could not fall asleep. She wondered what it was like for Bela. Not hearing, not speaking, was the silence peaceful? Or was it lonely? If Aaron needed her during the night, how would Bela know? Ruthie peered into their room. Bela lay sleeping, one arm dangling over the side of the bed. The blue yarn was still looped around her wrist. From there, it trailed across the floor to the cradle, ending in a bow around Aaron's tiny arm. Ruthie remembered seeing a string trail through the village, from little Sarah Lowley's sickbed to the synagogue's holy ark. Ruthie's mother had explained that the string carried the family's prayer for Sarah to get well again. But why would Bela tie a piece of yarn between herself and her baby in the night? Just then, Aaron began to cry. As his arms moved, the yarn tugged Bela awake. Bela lifted Aaron to a smoothing embrace and warmed his chilly hands on her cheeks. Early the next morning, Ruthie set to work knitting her softest, fluffiest skein of yarn. She stitched a slender cuff and a thumb, then shaped a tiny mitten top. Soon Ruthie had one mitten, just the right size for Aaron. As she was about to start on the other, Ruthie had an idea. This time she knitted a mitten big enough to fit Bela. Then she connected the mittens, large and small, with a length of string, perfect for Bela and Aaron on the coldest nights. So now they can have their string and have their hands be warm. When Ruthie gave her the mittens, Bela smiled with delight. She showed Ruthie the sign for mittens, sliding her left hand over her right and then her right hand over her left, like this. After breakfast, Ruthie knitted Bela and Aaron each a second mitten. Ruthie excitedly paired the mittens off for market. Connecting them with string could be threaded through a child's coat sleeves. Then the string would keep the mittens from getting lost. Maybe you've seen that on a coat or mittens when you were small. I know when I was small, my mittens would be on a string, and then the string would go through the coat to the other arm, and then they'd kind of just always be with my coat. And then I wouldn't have to look for them. They'd always be there, together, connected. Excuse me. You are both clever and kind, Ruthie's mother said, beaming with pride. You make our world a bit better with every stitch. Excuse me. Later, Bela showed Ruthie the woody plants she could use to make the bright blue color for her dye pots. Not long after, Bela's husband arrived with a repaired wagon, ready to take his family home for the Sabbath. Excuse me. Bela unraveled the blue yarn from her wrist and handed it to Ruthie. Ruthie wrote her thank you on Bela's slate. She also wrote the day of their next shearing. By that time, Ruthie thought Aaron would have outgrown his tiny mittens. She would make him a bigger pair, bright and blue, and of course tied together with a link of Tober yarn. Ruthie could hardly wait. So here's some knitting words and also some signs. The sign for knit. It's like you have two knitting needles. Knit. Mitten. Sheep, like you're cutting a sheep's wool. And yarn. And the author wrote a note saying, this story is about a real person. Her great-great-aunt, Bela Wertheim, who was deaf and lived in an Australian village in the 1800s. Bela wanted to ensure that she would wake when her baby cried in the night, so at bedtime she tied a string from her wrist to baby's. And that's just a story and one example about how individuals who are deaf have had to be creative and create accommodations and think of ways to solve problems in ways that we might have thought of to navigate the world. And sometimes we forget how things might be difficult for other people. So it's good to remember and think about how we can help make things easier for other individuals. Thank you for reading with me. Have a wonderful day.